The morning sun kissed the sea foam as the mystery machine rumbled down the dirt road, which ended abruptly on a desolate beach. "Whoa, Fred, are you sure this is it?" Daphne asked, her eyes scanning the horizon. The sign says Forgotten Isle, and the news reported mysterious ruins emerging after the ocean receded. Fred replied, adjusting the map on the dashboard. The air, heavy and damp, seemed to carry an ancient secret. Scooby and Shaggy, meanwhile, were already sniffing the sand, more interested in lost sandwiches than legends. As they approached the coast, a chilling sight unfolded. It wasn't just a few stones, but the imposing silhouette of a city emerged from the salty mist, eroded towers. Gigantic walls adorned with indecipherable symbols and statues of sea creatures that seemed to watch them with empty eyes. It was as if a piece of time had been vomited back to the surface. "Incredible!" Velma exclaimed, adjusting her glasses, her mind already buzzing with theories. These formations don't look natural, and the type of rock ... is not common for this region. As they explored the ruins, the sense of isolation and the grandeur of the place became overwhelming. Dark corridors snaked between buildings, leading to damp, echoing chambers. On the walls, bas-relief carvings told enigmatic stories of an ancient people, their lives intertwined with the sea and a dark deity. "Looks like they were big fans of ... tentacles," Shaggy commented, pointing to a grotesque engraving of a creature with multiple appendages and glowing eyes. Suddenly, a chill ran down everyone's spine. A dragging, guttural noise echoed from a tunnel ahead, followed by a sinister crack. "What was that?" Scooby yelped, hiding behind Shaggy. Before they could react, a colossal figure emerged from the shadows. It was a shapeless creature, composed of jagged corals and white bones, with glowing red eyes that seemed to burn in the darkness. It moved with terrifying slowness, each movement accompanied by a scraping sound of rock. Panic was instantaneous. The gang ran, their hearts pounding wildly, as the creature dragged itself behind them, its scraping sound filling the corridors. "That's not a guy in a costume," Daphne screamed, her voice mixing with the sound of their own footsteps. Fred tried to think of a plan, but the creature seemed immune to his usual tricks. They narrowly escaped, emerging back into the sunlight, breathless and in shock. Back at the mystery machine, still trembling, Velma analyzed a piece of pottery she had picked up. "This material isn't terrestrial, at least not known," she murmured. She then noticed something engraved on the bottom of the fragment, a map. A rudimentary but unmistakable map, pointing to the center of the island, where a large X marked what appeared to be a temple or sanctuary, and from where lines seemed to represent flows of energy. The coral and bone creature, they realized, seemed to have emerged from that direction. "It seems the real mystery isn't on the surface, but in the depths of this island," Velma concluded, the map in her hands trembling slightly. The group, still shaken by the encounter with the coral creature, decided that the only way to understand what was happening was to follow Velma's map. "Whatever it is, everything seems to lead to this central temple," Fred stated, tracing the route on the map. The path there was a tangled web of dense ruins, older and more imposing than anything they had seen before. The walls here were darker, covered by a kind of bioluminescent moss that cast a sinister glow. As they progressed, the evidence of a cult became undeniable. Instead of random symbols, they found primitive altars, where obsidian artifacts and polished bones were arranged in ritualistic patterns. Velma and Daphne, with the help of an ancient symbology book Daphne inexplicably carried, began to decipher the inscriptions. It seems they worshipped an entity that lived in the depths, an ocean mother or something. Daphne translated with a grimace of revulsion. They believed they had to feed her with sacrifices to maintain balance, or to prevent her from destroying them. The tone of the inscriptions was unsettling, describing bloody rituals and invocations of cosmic powers. What shocked them most was the discovery of recent sacrifice marks, not just ancient bones. but also fresh footprints and extinguished bonfires that exuded a pungent odor. "This isn't just history," Fred muttered, examining a puddle of dark liquid on the ground. "It seems the show goes on." The idea that the cult was still active, lurking in the shadows of the island, brought a new level of apprehension. Scooby and Shaggy, always looking for food, strayed from the main group, drawn by a strange smell of old pizza. Instead of pizza, they fell into an ancient trap, a hidden pit covered by foliage. Fred, with his knack for traps, rescued them. It was then that they noticed. A slender figure, cloaked in a dark robe, peered from behind a broken column. The figure moved with unnatural agility, disappearing before they could identify them. "Someone's watching us," Daphne whispered, a shiver running down her spine. "And it's not the coral creature." Velma, meanwhile, had found a more complex text. "The coral creature. It's not the deity itself," she revealed, her eyes fixed on the scriptures. "It's a kind of ... guardian, or perhaps an avatar. It's described as the sentinel of bones and ocean, created to protect the entrance to a sacred place, the cradle of essence. And the cult tried to imprison this essence ... or invoke it." The mystery deepened. Who was the cloaked figure? And why was the ancient cult active again? The island, which seemed like an ancient tomb, was revealing itself to be a nest of living secrets. They were getting closer to the central temple, but the feeling of being hunted increased with every step. "We're dealing with something much bigger than a simple villain in a costume," Fred concluded, the map of the central temple in his hands, suddenly feeling much more like an invitation to imminent danger than a guide. Night fell over the island, bringing with it an almost palpable darkness and the constant sound of the sea beating against the ruins. The group set up a makeshift camp, but sleep was a luxury they couldn't afford. Fred, more focused than ever, began to devise a plan to capture the coral creature. "If we can isolate it, we can unmask whoever is behind this," he explained, drawing diagrams in the sand. However, Velma expressed her doubts. "Fred, the old sentinel of bones and ocean, as they call it, might not be a who, but a what. Legends speak of it as a manifestation of the island itself, an elemental spirit." The conversation was interrupted by a distant noise, a rhythmic sound, almost like a muffled chant. It was subtle but unmistakable, coming from the depths of the island. Following the sound, they came upon a terrifyingly well-preserved sacrifice altar, hidden in an underground chamber. The smell of decay and rancid incense hung in the air. In the center of the altar, there was an obsidian bowl filled with a dark, clotted liquid, and around it, symbols carved into the ground radiated a sinister aura. "This is disturbing," Daphne murmured, recoiling. Velma, however, was mesmerized by the inscriptions around the altar. "They're preparing for a ritual," she said, her voice tense. "Legends say that by sacrificing lives, they can invoke the deep essence of the island, the same entity the Sentinel protects. And most frighteningly, some inscriptions speak of resurrection and soul transfer for those who prove worthy. The idea that the cult might be trying to bring someone back to life or transfer a consciousness into a new body added a dark layer to the mystery. While Velma tried to decipher more about the ritual, Scooby and Shaggy, who had stayed behind out of fear, stumbled into a secret passage. It led to a small side chamber where they found modern supplies, water bottles, biscuit packs, and even an old charging cell phone. "So, they've been here for a while," Shaggy whispered. This confirmed that the cult was not just a memory of the past, but an active threat in the present. Suddenly, the coral and bone creature reappeared, not stealthily, but with renewed fury. It seemed to react to their presence at the altar, as if they were desecrating a sacred site. Its red eyes glowed intensely, and it advanced with surprising speed, almost as if the ritual itself was energizing it. The confrontation was more direct this time. The creature showed surprising strength, knocking down columns and rocks, and the gang had to use all their wits and agility to escape. Fred tried his traps, but the creature seemed to dodge them with surprising intelligence, perhaps by instinct or because someone was controlling it. As they fled, Velma managed to tear off a piece of an ancient parchment stuck to one of the altar walls. Although it was almost destroyed, one phrase stood out. When the high tide kisses the sanctuary on the dark moon, the final ritual will be fulfilled and the gate will open to the will of the essence. Time was running out. It wasn't just a matter of unmasking a villain, but of preventing an ancient, dangerous, and incomprehensible power from being unleashed. The next high tide wasn't just a change in water level, but a fatal deadline for the fate of the island, and perhaps beyond. Chapter 4. The Trap of the Rising Tide. Velma's parchment was unmistakable. The next high tide was approaching, and with it, the final ritual would be activated. Time was their most implacable enemy. "We have no choice. We need to reach the central temple before the ocean swallows it again," Fred declared, the tension evident in his voice. The forecast was for an exceptionally high tide, capable of submerging a large part of the ruins. If they didn't act fast, the mystery would be taken to the bottom, perhaps forever. The journey to the central temple, the sanctuary mentioned in the parchment, became a desperate race against the clock and against the island itself. With each step, the water advanced, filling corridors and caves with a hissing, ominous sound. The air grew colder and damper, and visibility decreased as sunlight was swallowed by the salty mist and the ruins themselves. The coral and bone creature seemed to be everywhere. It not only followed them, but anticipated their movements, emerging from side passages and submerged tunnels. It was as if the island was active, and it was its eyes and arms. There was a tense moment when the creature blocked a narrow passage, forcing Fred to improvise a trap with loose stones, which narrowly missed trapping Scooby and Shaggy instead of the creature. "It's intelligent," Velma gasped as they crawled through a crack in the rock. As they struggled to advance, Daphne spotted something familiar amidst the shadows, a leather bracelet with an engraved insignia. She recognized it. It was a symbol of a radical, environmentalist group that had recently been in the news for invading historical sites in the name of natural preservation. "I can't believe it," she exclaimed. "It's Dr. Albright's bracelet, the renowned oceanographer who invited us to investigate the ruins. He was obsessed with this island." The revelation was a shock. Dr. Albright, who had presented himself as a benefactor of science, was the likely leader of the cult, manipulating them from the beginning. The coral creature, seemingly enraged by their proximity to the sanctuary, launched a final massive attack. It emerged from a pool of dark water in the heart of the temple, larger and more imposing than ever, its coral body glowing with a sinister internal light. This time, it wasn't just a chase, but a direct confrontation. The creature demonstrated surprising control over the environment, causing rocks to fall from the ceiling and the water to churn violently. Fred, with Velma's help, set up a final complex trap, using the temple's ancient drainage system. Scooby and Shaggy, with their unique ability to run in a panic, were instrumental in luring the creature to the right spot. The confrontation was tense and dangerous, with the group narrowly escaping being crushed. At the height of the confrontation, while the creature was momentarily trapped, Velma and Daphne rushed toward the central altar. There, amidst newly carved symbols and fresh blood, they found a cloaked figure kneeling in front of a pedestal. When the figure turned, the cloak slipped, revealing Dr. Albright's face, his eyes glowing with a manic intensity. He held a shimmering artifact, and his voice resonated through the temple. "You're too late. The tide is high, and the gate will open to the will of the essence." Albright raised the artifact, and a pulsating light began to emanate from the pedestal, connecting to the coral creature, which thrashed furiously in Fred's trap. It wasn't just Albright, but something greater was beginning to manifest. The revelation of Dr. Albright as the cult leader was a shocking blow. "Dr. Albright, what are you doing?" Fred exclaimed as the temple ceiling trembled and the tide water rose relentlessly around them. Dr. Albright's eyes, once those of a reputable scientist, now burned with fanatic devotion. "I'm not doing anything, young man. I'm just completing what these ancients started." The will of the essence was dormant, but now, with the rituals and the right tide, it will ascend and lead us to a new era. He explained that the coral and bone creature was not the final monster, but a preliminary manifestation of the island's deep essence, an ancient spirit imprisoned by the cult itself to protect a greater secret. Albright believed that by releasing this entity, he would be granted unimaginable wisdom and power, becoming the new prophet of a post-human era. The artifact he held, an obsidian amulet, pulsed with a sinister energy, feeding the coral creature, which, now directly connected to the essence, became more violent and uncontrollable, tearing through Fred's traps with ease. Velma, using her tablet, quickly accessed ancient legends about Dr. Albright. He had disappeared years earlier on an unsuccessful expedition, and it was believed he had either lost his sanity or perished. He didn't go crazy, he was possessed, Velma realized, as she read about legends of ancient priests who became vessels for the will of the essence. Dr. Albright was just a pawn, manipulated by a much larger and older force. Dr. Albright's ritual reached its climax. The light from the amulet intensified, and the coral creature began to disintegrate, its fragments reforming into something even grander and more terrifying. A mass of shimmering tentacles and glowing eyes emerged from the depths of the temple's central pool, a being of pure energy in shifting form, accompanied by a guttural sound that seemed to resonate directly in their minds. It was the true, deep essence manifesting, and the psychic pressure was almost unbearable. Scooby and Shaggy, despite their fear, noticed something. Albright's amulet, though powerful, seemed to have a weakness. It needed to be constantly charged with the ritual S-energy. In an act of desperation and pure survival instinct, they concocted a plan worthy of their most creative minds. While Fred and Daphne tried to distract the creature by throwing pieces of ruins at it, Scooby and Shaggy, using an ancient ritualistic catapult they found, launched a bag of garlic and sardine sandwiches directly at Dr. Albright. The smell was so potent that, for an instant, Albright's concentration was broken. The amulet flickered. The connection to the essence wavered. It was the time Velma needed. She had noticed a pattern in the temple symbols, a cycle of invocation and, conversely, of sealing. Using the information from the parchment, she identified a counter-ritual. "We need to reverse the sequence of the symbols on the altar," she shouted over the roar of the essence. Fred, Daphne, Scooby, and Shaggy worked together, racing against time to activate the glyphs in reverse order while the essence struggled to break free, and Albright desperately tried to regain control of the ritual. The temple trembled violently, the water rose, and the very structure of the island seemed to be falling apart. When the last glyph was activated, the light from Albright's amulet shattered, and the deep essence, with an inaudible scream of fury, began to shrink, to contort, to be pulled back into the depths from whence it came. But victory was precarious. The temple was crumbling, and the island was sinking rapidly. With the counter-ritual complete, the deep essence was pulled back into the depths, its colossal manifestation dissipating into a whirlwind of water and light. The coral and bone creature, its connection to the essence broken, disintegrated into an inert pile of marine debris. Dr. Albright, his face pale and eyes vacant, fell inanimate to the temple floor, freed from the entity's influence, but mentally exhausted. He wasn't the real villain, Velma noted, examining him. He was a puppet, the true mastermind behind the manipulation, a shadowy figure who had operated in the cult's shadows for generations, was revealed. It was a descendant of the original cult lineage, who had secretly kept the legends alive and waited for the right moment to use Dr. Albright as a pawn. He was an elderly, discreet man who had introduced himself as the local historian who had given them the initial tips about the ruins, and who had hidden in the shadows throughout the investigation, nurturing his own ambitions for power. He had fled in the chaos of the ritual, but not without leaving behind a diary with his macabre plans and the history of his obsessive lineage. With the essence sealed and the true villain exposed, victory seemed at hand. However, the triumph was short-lived. The counter-ritual and the destabilization of the essence had a catastrophic effect on the island. The ruins, now stripped of their mystic power, began to give way rapidly. Gigantic cracks opened in the ground, and ancient columns collapsed with deafening crashes. The tide continued to rise, not only swallowing the coast but flooding the inner chambers at an alarming rate. The island was, once again, being reclaimed by the ocean. "The island is sinking," Fred shouted, pointing to the crumbling walls. The team had to improvise a desperate escape. Scooby and Shaggy, using a route they had discovered during their previous escapes, guided the group through a series of underground tunnels that led directly to a secluded beach. As they fled, the echoes of the collapses resonated behind them, and the water followed them closely, almost reaching them. They emerged onto the beach, breathless, exhausted, and drenched. The mystery machine, fortunately, was still where they left it, but the island behind them was unrecognizable. The ruins were rapidly being swallowed by the rising waves, and in a matter of minutes, the forgotten isle was once again beneath the waters, as if it had never existed. The group watched in silence as the island disappeared. The mystery had been solved, the danger neutralized, and an ancient cult was dismantled. But, unlike other cases, this one left a deeper mark. The coral and bone creature was an enigma beyond human comprehension, a reminder of the hidden forces that permeate the world. Dr. Albright would be treated and perhaps recover, but the experience had changed him forever. Back on the road, as the mystery machine drove away from the coast, the sunset painted the sky with shades of orange and purple. The feeling of closure was bittersweet. They had triumphed, but the memory of the sunken island and the deep essence would remain. Wow, at least we know some monsters ... aren't just costumes, Shaggy said, with an uncharacteristically serious tone. Scooby-Doo nodded, a thoughtful "Raha." The adventure on the sunken isle had changed the group's perception of what is real and what is legend. The world was bigger and more mysterious than they had ever imagined, and they were ready for any secret the depths or the heights might reveal. The journey continued, and with it, the relentless pursuit of answers.